buenos días a todos y a todas. Tengo hoy el placer de entrevistar a Poppy Yaman, como habéis podido observar en la biografía, una de las personas más respetadas e influyentes, no solo en la escena en el Reino Unido, pero también a nivel internacional, en lo que a salud mental en el trabajo respecta. Y Poppy es influente a diferentes niveles, no solo a través de las personas trabajadoras, sino también a través de concienciación en las líneas de mando intermedias y los líderes, como hemos hablado, ¿no? Las personas dirigentes o CEOs al más alto nivel. Pero también desde la política, Poppy ejerce también su influencia en estamentos gubernamentales o miembros del Parlamento y contribuye a generar la discusión y el debate sobre la promoción y priorización, ¿no?, de salud mental en el trabajo. El formato que hemos diseñado para esta sesión va a ser un poco una entrevista íntima, es conocer un poco más acerca de Poppy, la persona, y posteriormente hablaremos, ¿no?, del papel que los profesionales de seguridad y salud en el trabajo o bienestar o otras profesiones relacionadas con personas, las organizaciones y sus dirigentes pueden realizar, ¿no?, cuando se trata de mejorar, ¿no?, la salud y el bienestar mental de las personas trabajadoras. Así que sin más dilación, Poppy, welcome to Madrid and the financial city of Santander's financial city.
Thank you very much. Hola a todos and a todas. y todos. My Spanish is not great, but thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm not even sure what Ivan just said about me, so it could all be lies. It could all be lies. You're going to find out.
As I was mentioning, Poppy is a really well-known figure in the UK and internationally, but I think that's something that would probably, the audience will benefit about is knowing a bit more about yourself and probably if you could share your unique personal story with us and the audience.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. So look, I lead Mind Forward Alliance. We are a global organization working with multinational businesses all over the world. We started with the financial services sector about a decade ago. So in fact, last week we celebrated our 10th birthday. So we're 10 years old in the world. We're a social enterprise, which means we're a not-for-profit organization. And we started when the economic crash happened back in 2007, 2008. And we saw the significant rise in mental health challenges, in stressors amongst city workers working in the financial services sector. And very tragically, in the City of London, which is where we started our organization, so we were previously called the City Mental Health Alliance, which is why you can see both of our brands, and now we're called Mind Forward Alliance. We've changed our name because the word city doesn't resonate all over the world. But anyway, we started in the City of London at the economic crash, and we had some really tragic suicides in the City of London. PwC, to name one, was one of the businesses where somebody died in their offices from stress and, I imagine, mental health difficulties. So we saw a significant rise in stress, mental health difficulties, suicide amongst men, and professionals, leaders in the City of London decided to come together and talk about mental health. And it was a unique outcome from a tragic situation which led to businesses coming together to create mentally healthy workplaces. I, at the time, was running another organization called Mental Health First Aid. Many of you would have heard of Mental Health First Aid, and if you haven't, please look it up. It's first aid for individuals and managers and family members to train up and learn how to talk about mental health. Anyway, at the time I was running Mental Health First Aid, I met these city leaders and we came together and formed the Alliance, which is now 10 years old in Hong Kong, Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, India, Portugal, and we're building Europe, and I'm hoping that some of the colleagues in this room will help us to do that. But the reason why mental health is so important to me personally, and I think this is really important, I think it was Andrew who asked the question in the first presentation we got, why is this important to you? So I'd like to share why mental health and safety is important to me. When I was just in my early 20s, I had my first baby. She's now 26 years old and living in Mexico. So the story ends really well. But actually, when I had her, I was a young mom. I was a single parent. I was really struggling financially. I had no job. I had left education at an early age, so actually I hadn't qualified with a full degree, etc. So life prospects felt very limited. I didn't really have any money. I had a relationship breakdown and I had a young baby. If all of these things come together, doesn't cause you mental health difficulties, then I don't know what does. So at that point, my health visitor noticed, and that's another thing we talk about in the mental health world, is the first stage is to be able to pause, sit with someone and notice that there is something going on with them that is not their usual self. So my health visitor noticed, and with curiosity, she asked what was going on in my world. And that curiosity and that investigation, that deep understanding, that listening, led to my diagnosis of postnatal depression. And when I had depression, I mean, I'm a British Bangladeshi woman, so there's a whole load of cultural elements in there that therapists, so when you have depression or a mental health diagnosis, there's medication, there's talking therapies, there's social lifestyle changes that we all need to make, which we're going to talk about, and workplaces can play a strong role in that, and I'll tell you why. I got referred to therapy, and the therapy wasn't working. And the reason why the therapy wasn't working was the therapist couldn't understand my frame of reference, my cultural difference. And the medication was making me too tired, so all of these things weren't working. So what I decided to do, I come from, like I said, a British Bangladeshi family. We have very strong work ethics in our community. I decided to get a job. And that job paid me less than what it was to be on social benefits. I don't know if you have that in Spain. So at the time, like I said, I was in a very difficult position. But I took that job, and what that job did was it gave me routine, it gave me structure, it gave me the ability to have financial agency and resources. But the person that made the most difference in my recovery wasn't my doctor, wasn't my therapist, wasn't my psychiatrist, it was my manager. This woman didn't really know what was going on in my life. But what she did is spotted a young woman who was talented, clearly had a lot to give, that's myself, and she encouraged me, so she gave me interesting projects. She encouraged me to go back to education. She built my confidence up, and she also made the workplace a safe place where my mental health could be created. And notice I said my mental health can be created. So how safety can be created, mental health can also be created with the right environmental factors. So anyway, that was 26 years ago, but that experience, like the two colleagues who stood up earlier and said why safety meant to them because they had lost tragically a friend, they'd had their own lived experience. My lived experience then made me determined that every workplace in the world should be a place where mental health and well-being is created and not diminished. And if we do happen to have a mental illness, which is very common, 1 in 4 of us before the pandemic were experiencing a common mental health problem. Since the pandemic, that has increased significantly, and I challenge anybody in this room who says we don't know what, we've not had a lived experience, or we don't have a family member that has gone through something difficult. That experience has led me to go, actually, we need to work with the world's biggest brands, the most influential businesses, the most wealthy businesses, and get their chief executives, their boards, measuring and creating change. Because when big brands come together and talk about mental health and create the kind of change that you are all talking about and listening to today, then the world changes, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to dominate the world with mental health and well-being.
Thanks, Poppy, for sharing, just a tiny bit of your inspirational experiences. And as you were saying, also your past experience in the last 20 years, leading some of the most successful mental health and well-being organizations. And I think this is something I would like to move on. You mentioned that differentiation between both positive and poor mental health. So it is true that the narrative that we tend to get from the media or in workplaces tends to focus the conversation around poor mental health. So can you please let us know what you've done in the past few years to deal with the stigma? Here we're talking about the social and cultural stigma associated to mental health when it comes to workplaces.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Van. So, look, I think first thing to say is it starts with us as leaders, as professionals, as individuals. If we own the agenda and if we share our own experiences, that's the biggest thing that you can do to diminish stigma. And I'll give you some examples in a moment. But the other things that we did were national and global campaigns. So we run a campaign called Green Ribbon Campaign, and that was started again within PwC. And again, another story. It was started by a young woman whose mother had significant mental health difficulties, and she was working for PwC at the time. And she introduced the idea of everybody wearing a green ribbon, like, you know, where you wear the pink ribbon for cancer, breast cancer, so green ribbon. And if you wore a green ribbon, you signal to the world that you are open to talking about mental health. So not you have mental health, you are open to talking about mental health. That's all it meant. Anyway, that Green Ribbon campaign is now gone global. Businesses all over the world have adopted the Green Ribbon campaign, and if you Google Green Ribbon campaign, it will come up. And that was a campaign that was not run on just, you know, World Mental Health Day or Suicide Prevention Day. All of those anchor campaign days are important, but actually it was run throughout the business over 18 months. That's one thing that we did. The other thing that we did was one of our organization's businesses, I think it was Barclays actually, who started it with a couple of other businesses whose names I don't remember right now. But it was called the This Is Me campaign. And again, if you Google This Is Me mental health campaign, and This Is Me was a storytelling campaign. And so what we did was we gathered people across the business, from the chief executive to people in hospitality, to people in security, to people that were managers, and we asked them, who are you? And so they would say, you know, I'm Poppy, I have 2 children, I have an executive job, and actually I have depression, and this is how I manage my depression. And
starting conversations, really.
Starting conversations, and the idea was to normalize it, because the stigma against mental health means that we think it's about other people out there on the streets that aren't living, that it can't be us, it can't be those of us in this room, it can't be chief executives, it can't be finance directors, it can't be board members. But what This Is Me did was it showed businesses all over the world that actually within their businesses there were people with all sorts of mental health diagnoses, and they were coming out and they were talking. So the This Is Me campaign and the Green Ribbon campaign were just 2 examples of campaigns that came out of our businesses. But the thing that changed the story and normalized mental health, and is still continuing to do so, is leadership vulnerability. And what I mean by leadership vulnerability is there's this idea of a culture that if you're a leader, particularly if you're male leaders, that you're invincible, that nothing can hurt you. Actually, men don't talk about emotions. And it was that, because we know at the top of most businesses all over the world, there's still a very strong male presence. So when we got male leaders, so I'll get two examples. John Flint is our chair. John Flint was the global group head of HSBC. They're in 66 countries, 250,000 employees. And he started talking about the healthiest human system. And he wanted HSBC to have the healthiest human system. That was massive in the City of London and globally, such a massive anchor organization and its global CEO talking about healthy human systems. Brian Hayworth, who's the UK chair of City Mental Health Alliance, he talks very openly about being in investment banking, how his mental health deteriorated, but actually in hindsight it was probably in his teenage years that he started to struggle, but he powered through life like so many of us do, and then he crashed, and actually he was on suicide watch for two months at the Priory in a mental ill health hospital. But he came out and he's a successful businessman and continues to be so. So the idea that if you have a mental illness, that's the end of your life is nonsense. Actually, recovery is 100% possible. And when people understand that, actually the stigma of mental ill health diminishes a little because it's everywhere. And not talking about it means crisis points. Talking about it means maybe we can do some things to prevent and even enhance our well-being.
That's really interesting food for thought, and it is true that we tend to restrict the conversation sometimes to some positions, but we do have like line managers or more members from the senior leadership team struggling but not exposing, as you were saying, their vulnerabilities. And Poppy, because we are in a health and safety conference, I would like to ask you about the role of health and safety professionals. We know this is clearly uncharted waters for them. We've seen in previous conversations health and safety professionals, they could be asked also to cover environmental issues, sustainability issues, even human resources issues. But why the age of health, in health and safety, needs to be prioritized?
Yeah, look, so first of all, I saw that most of you stood up when Andrew asked how many people were working as health and safety practitioners and professionals, and I thank you all with all my heart. You've got a very tough job, and it's often isolated in businesses. So for me, health and safety people need to be at the heart of this change, because you guys, you are all data gurus. So you have at your fingertips the data plus in your intellect the analytical skills that we need at board level to be able to say, actually, this is what the data is showing within our business, within our industry, and this is the HRAs, the health and safety improvements that we can put in place in order to create change in the team unit, in the business unit, in the whole organization and then the impact of that on a societal level. And I would say sort of two or three things to you. First of all, I think as a reassurance, World Health Organization last October, for the first time created guidelines on mental health at work. They took 2.5 years to write those guidelines because they had to be universal. So they could apply to the rickshaw driver in Bangladesh, to chief executives of big financial businesses. So in those guidelines, they have given recommendations on an individual level, on a manager level, on a business organizational level, and the ecosystem level. So I think that's one point of reference that you should all familiarize yourselves with, because that gives you the power to say, look, the world is changing. So if we as businesses or your organizations aren't leaning into this and aren't creating mental health as a strategic business objective, then you're going to be falling behind the curve. The other thing that I would say is the ESG agenda, environmental, societal, government, depending on where your interpretation. But the ESG agenda up until now has wholly focused on the E, which is brilliant, because if we haven't got a world to live in, what's the point? But the S is really, really important, and we've created an ESG guide, which you can see on our website. You can download it, where we talk about building well-being capital within a business. And what I mean by that is, if you are looking after your people, if you are designing jobs that aren't long working hours culture, that people have autonomy in, that bullying and harassment is absolutely not going to be tolerated, that your manager is skilled to listen to you and have a conversation about your whole self and not just the workload in front of you. If all of those things are in place, human beings, we actually feel better, which means that the collective well-being capital in a business is growing, which means there's more loyalty, there's more productivity, people are happier, so they're connected to each other, and all of those things together create the output of mental health and well-being. So coming back to 2 or 3 points of advice to OSH professionals is, ask yourself the question, or use data to inform the mental health or well-being strategy. Now, you are the people that hold that. So what is it that you need to do to connect with HR, connect with ESG, connect with business strategy to ensure that your data is then driving the business strategy? And there are KPIs who are listening to this, but there are also KPIs at board level that are measuring that change, and you become the provider of that change. I think it's very difficult because every profession or every sector attracts certain personality types, and I don't think finance or health and safety, as we heard earlier, is often seen as sexy or trendy or whatever it may be. But actually, you're the heart of this change. And for me, you need to believe that, and then you need to drive that, because that's where boards need to come to go, are we creating the change that we want to see in the world? And I think what I would also say is, make sure the reporting includes benchmarking data so that your business leaders can see how you fare against other competition out there. Because I tell you what, if there's one thing that changes business and leadership mindset, is competition and thinking that their peers are doing better than them. That is a narrative that we've used to create this alliance.
A lot of information to digest, I'm sure of it. I guess it is true that from a health and safety perspective, and also from the management perspective, there's also done malpractice or trend that sometimes initiatives tend to be focused on like a nice to have. So this could be producing or preparing, let's say, like a mindfulness activity or something more in relation to physical health. What would be your advice to have like a more holistic approach to mental health and well-being, and also like more sustaining in time, because it is true that many of the measures or interventions that we tend to see tend to be framed on a short-term basis.
Yeah, do you know, Ivan, that's such a good question. So yoga and fruit bowls isn't the solution to this. It's yoga and fruit bowls, great. I love fruit, I love yoga, I practice yoga most days. But that isn't going to get us through this. When we did a piece of work with BNY Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon, and their chair at the time, and he was brilliant. He took the data internally, and he got the business to analyze it, and they were losing millions at the time because people weren't healthy in the culture. And so he said, look, if this was an IT problem, and we were, say, losing £5 million a year to IT, what would you do? You would put a business strategy in place. You would put an expert leading that strategy in place. You would actually make it a boardroom agenda. You'd put a change and transformation plan in place, and you would give it 18 months to 3 years to actually create the change that you are looking for, because it would require training everybody. It would require a reset of the culture. So why is it that we don't do that with business? And bearing in mind that you are all expert minds, use your business acumen to solve this problem and see it as a problem that can be solved. So that's what I would say, is that actually this isn't, celebrating campaigns around the world, World Mental Health Day, like I said, suicide prevention, mental health awareness week, all of those things are great. But if you're just doing that, then you're well-being washing, a bit like greenwashing. There is such a big gap between the say-do gap, so businesses are saying one thing and doing something completely different. So for me, it's seeing a long-term strategy that is at least 3 years old, with the right resources, with the right collaborations to create the change. So again, I go back to PwC. I noted down a case study. I mean, they created a health and well-being dashboard with sickness data, EAP usage, occupational health referrals, and they created an internal well-being index, which was based on a survey that they created. And they experimented with 1,000 people on biometric data inputs using gadgets to see if people were experiencing physiological elements to stress at different points. And that experiment is still ongoing. So there is quite a lot that businesses can do to create the kind of change that I'm talking about here.
That's great to know. And because we are at the epicenter of Santander's financial city, let's talk a bit more about leadership, but also money. One of the things that we are starting to notice, I guess, in some businesses is that post-pandemic period, they are starting to disinvest in health and well-being functions, structures, or budgets. So this is a bit weird, because it comes after a time where safety, physical safety, but also mental health was high in the agenda of businesses.
Yeah, I mean, Ivan, it is really disappointing when you are seeing some businesses take health off of the agenda. During the pandemic, it was horrific what happened during the pandemic. And again, I go back to sort of my ethnicity, so I've got family that are all over the world, but in collectively, we lost 18 people in UK, America, India, Bangladesh to COVID or COVID related. And I'm not unique in that. People all over the world, COVID for some people has ended. For many people, the trauma of COVID continues. So businesses that are removing their mental health and well-being safety elements are being very, very short-sighted. But what I do know is that there are more businesses coming on board the mental health and well-being agenda than exiting. The thing that I think is really crucial here is, in the middle of, before the pandemic, I used to go and speak to chief executives of boards, and I'd have to convince them, you can ask the question, how are you? And it is a workplace question, and it's like, oh, well, it doesn't feel quite comfortable. And during the pandemic, every single chief executive in the world asked the question, how are you? And listened actively. For me, that was mass training, that we can have compassion and we can have empathy in the workplace, and it doesn't take away from the work that one has to do. In fact, it enhances relationships and builds well-being capital. So coming back to the resources and leadership, like we are at the heart of financial district here, and it is absolutely crucial that boards lean into this. When we did there was a UK survey, it was thousands of people were asked a question. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's statistically relevant. That I think it's 70% of boards feel that their businesses are doing all the right things for mental health and well-being, compared to 30% of managers saying that they feel skilled and equipped to dealing with it. So if that data shows the say-do gap and the lack of correlation between what leaders think is happening and what is really happening and that's partly because of the resources. So just because you've put it on the boardroom agenda, it doesn't mean that the right resources are allocating to it. We have to think about the triple bottom line. And this is when I go back to ESG, the environmental factor, the people factor, and the profit factor. People, profit, planet. We have to think about the bottom line. Businesses can't be just about making enormous amount of profits at the expense of our children's mental health. And also, if you are a parent in a business and your young people are not well at home, you're not going to be performing at work. So actually, businesses, one of the things that we did was with a couple of law firms, we created the Parents Guide, the Parents Toolkit to Mental Health. It was our #1 most downloaded document, which again you can find on our website, and we were really surprised. But actually, when you think about it, globally, the mental ill health amongst young people is significantly rising. You can understand it. We've got an economic downturn, job prospects aren't out there, the world is in chaos, there's conflict all over the world, and actually the environmental crisis is huge. So young people are increasingly feeling hopeless. So if you're the parent, so if you're in my age, mid-40s, you're very likely, not everybody, but you're very likely to have young people in your family. Actually, if I'm worried about my kids, I'm not going to be coming to work and being my best self. It's just a given. It's just humanity. It's just it's just the way it is. So I think businesses then leaning in and taking care of the whole person and saying, well, actually, what's concerning you? Okay, you haven't got time to get educated about young people's mental health and how to have a conversation about mental health with your teenager. Let's do that in work time. Those are the really small things that is within the capabilities and doesn't cost much, that every business can apply, that makes an individual within the business feel more valued and enhances well-being, and has a societal impact, going back to ESG, of educating through the workplace around mental health, which actually has an impact in our kitchen tables, in our schools, in our colleges, in our universities.
That's really, really interesting, and I think it's important to understand and to inform that much of the conversations that we have are about creating the debate, raising awareness, but we really need to take apart the clinical treatment side of the things, because of course we do have other professionals that are capable and have been trained and educated on that. Here in Spain we do have like occupational medicine, healthcare professionals, and so on and so forth.
I think, sorry, Ivan, can I interrupt
Sure.
you on that? So on that, I think it's really important, like people will say, well, actually, mental health isn't a workplace agenda, it's professionals. I don't want to be a line manager and trained in mental health because I haven't got, what if somebody says to me they want to die by suicide, what am I going to do? And this is really important. So you've got one, this may not be completely up-to-date data because the post-pandemic data is still coming out, but pre-pandemic, 1 to 3 people in 100 will experience a severe mental illness like psychosis or schizophrenia. Then you come down, and for those people, they need help, they need hospitalized care, they need extremely supportive professional care. Then you come down and actually the triangle, and majority of the people that are experiencing mental health struggles are going to be sort of common mental health issues like depression, anxiety. I'm not saying that they're not debilitating, but they there are more common mental health difficulties. And actually, you can make a lot of adjustments in your life, in your job, to support those people. And here, that's where that middle bit, where it's 1 to 4, 1 in 4, 1 in 6 people. Actually, if you've got line managers, or not even line managers, people trained within your business to actually spot the early warning signs. So what are the early warning signs? So it's you're looking for change, okay? So if somebody normally comes into work at 9 o'clock every day, is now starting to come to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. If somebody looks immaculate all the time and is starting to look disheveled, or the other way around. So I used to work with somebody who, when she looked unkempt and hadn't brushed her hair, I knew that she was fine. When she looked slick, I knew that there was something wrong, because actually it was a change from her normal, and she was actually trying to be in control of what was going on. So the one way she did it was looking extremely smart. So you're looking for change in people. So it could be change in working patterns, it could be change in mood on a regular basis, it could be irritability, it could be looking tired, it could be whatever it is, because it's unique to us. All you do is you go, Ivan, I'm noticing that you're looking rather smart today, and you normally don't, so what's going on for you? So it's just having a conversation to open that opportunity. If they then go, all of these things are going on in my life, actually most businesses, or in the UK's, there's the NHS, you can actually go like, you need to call a doctor, you need to let me support you over a period of time to help you get the support that you need. But most people in businesses don't even know that they've got an employee assistance program, that they've got occupational health services, or what the support services are. So that's the 1 in 6. And then down to the bottom, 1 in 1. Every single one of us has mental health. Okay, just like we have physical health, every single one of us has mental health. So that's where the businesses can do lots of things like education on eating, sleeping, time management, yada, yada, yada. So, and if you do that for the whole population, you increase the health of the whole population. And that's important, because very rarely will you sit in front of someone who is suicidal. But you do need to know what to do if somebody is feeling those feelings. Because it's a common feeling. When most people have had a moment where they've thought, oh, this room would be better off without me, or this place would be better off without me, because that's what happens when we're really, really stressed. It's okay to have that conversation, because once somebody said it, actually the relief that comes from that, being able to trust to say, I just feel like I don't want to be here anymore. That's the only intervention that is sometimes required.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point, the one about identifying red flags, throughout conversations, or one-to-ones when it comes to line management and workers and so on. Yeah, I'm conscious of time, and I think I do have a last question that I would appreciate if you could cover it, probably like 1 minute or so. And I think then Alberto, throughout the Q&A sessions, we'll be doing like a follow-up question. So I think it's the case for further investment. So how health and safety professionals can ask for more money, when it comes to budgets, functions, or actions.
Look, the business case for this is really evident, and you might need to write a business case with your HR, with your ESG. So I would say getting a number of business units together and key people that understand this and saying, shall we collaborate to create a business case based on our experiences and what the cost of not doing this is going to be. So I've seen Deloitte did a business case where every pound invested was £9 return. Unmind did another one which was £1.49 invested is £11 return. So there are business cases out there that consultant companies have done, but most business leaders will say, oh, well, that's not relevant, that's for out there. So I would say you need a unique business case for your company, which will talk about reputation enhancement, visibility of the business out there in the world as a forward-thinking business, what the value of that is in potentially for the business, and then also attracting and retaining talent. At the end of the day, our businesses are as good as our people, and if you're not attracting the right people because you're seen as an archaic organization out there, you're not going to succeed long term anyway. I'd just say one more thing. We have started to see the correlation data on like S&P index. So the more businesses are investing in mental health and well-being, the more actually, there's a time lag obviously, but from investment to output, but the business's value financially is increasing. Oxford University, we're working with them and they're going to be launching a report within the next 4 weeks on that data, so look out for that as well.
Thanks for that. And before calling Alberto to the stage...
He's already there?
Oh, yes. Just last reminder that you can still use Slido if you would like to pose any questions to Poppy. A quick note that these are the directrices de la Organización Mundial de la Salud sobre salud mental en el trabajo, lectura muy recomendada. And you can also access all the resources and materials that Poppy was mentioning in terms of what City Mental Health Alliance, Mental Health Estate in England, and more recently the Mind Forward Alliance have been producing. So, Alberto, over to you.
Bueno, hay una pregunta que querían ellos saber de vosotros, entonces os pediría que cogieseis el móvil, un segundo, que pusieseis la luz, la cámara, la linterna, ¿no? Para que, es que aquí se ve muy poquita la luz, entonces ya va apareciendo esto un estadio, un poquito más de luces, por favor, qué bonito está quedando esto. Vale, entonces, ¿quieren saber en las compañías en las que trabajáis qué presupuesto tenéis asignado a temas relacionados con bienestar y, bueno, well-being y mental health, ¿no? Entonces, los que no, entre 0 y 10.000 euros, y el resto que baje la luz, hay unos cuantos, entre 10 y 50.000 euros al año, casi la misma proporción, más de 50.000 euros.
0 to 10K, 10 to 15K and 15K.
Bueno, yo creo que estáis más en la parte de 0 a 10. So, I don't know if you understand the questions, and also you saw the lights with the different sections.
So
es una pregunta complicada a lo mejor de resolver, pero bueno, de contestar.
Up to 10 to 15K, yes.
Y como vamos bien de tiempo, tenemos 2 preguntas. Y la voy directamente a Poppy en inglés. Okay, how would you go about creating well-being indexes?
So that's quite a big question. So if whoever the anonymous person is would like to come and say hello or drop me a note on LinkedIn, I'll introduce you to PwC so that you can have a direct conversation with them about how they created the index. But it starts with a survey. So McKinsey Health Institute created a burnout survey, which is online in 21 languages. That's another tool that you can use. So if you want to drop me a message or say hello afterwards, give me your card, I'll send you that. But it starts with asking your employees a series of questions.
Another question for you as well is how we can really transform the traditional mindset from the company top management to enroll everyone on mental health. There is no health without mental health.
Yep, there's definitely no health without mental health. And like I said, I think there's 2 things that helped. One was getting business leaders in a room, in a safe place that's not recorded, that's confidential, 6 to 10 people, and they were talking with their peers. And when they heard their peers say, well, actually, we're doing this at PwC, and we're doing this at Goldman Sachs, and we're doing it, suddenly the group came together and went, okay, it's okay to actually step into this. So that's why we're the alliance, that's one of the things that we do, is we get people, chief financial officers, in the same room, small groups, talking about why this is important, influencing each other. And there's nothing like the power of stories. If one of those individuals then says, actually, I had a breakdown, or my daughter, or my son, or my wife, suddenly everything changes.
And the last one is a very easy one. What in your experience are 3 keys to build an emotional, safe workplace? Very easy question. Only 3.
So what in your experience are the 3 keys to build an emotionally safe workplace? I think we've got the 3 pillars out there in one of the slides here. So, psychological safety. If I can come to work and say to my manager, do you know what? I'm having a really bad mental health day, and actually there's all sorts of things going on in my life, and I'm not really coping at the moment, I'm struggling. If I can be that honest and not be ridiculed or criticized or diminished in any way, I'm also going to be the same person that brings my most ridiculous ideas to the same manager, because I know that they will listen, and that's how innovation happens. So when you create a culture of psychological safety where people can bring their saddest self to the workplace, they will also bring their best and most creative self to the workplace. So that would be, I would say, the most important thing. The other one is about making sure that support is available. So once you start on this mental health journey, you have to make sure that you know where people can go for support, both externally in the community, but also, do you have an occupational health? Do you have an EAP service that's appropriate? How do you access that? Is it free? Is it communicated? So the resources, and then finally, I would say the environment. If your job is asking you to work 12 to 14 hours a day, which we know in law firms all over the world, you're not going to have well-being, are you? You're just going to have burnout. So things like creating the right environment and job